welcome back to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about the penultimate story in the first series of the Sarah Jane Adventures. Whatever Happened to Sarah Jane, written by Gareth Roberts and is directed by Graham Harper. This story is very unique in the canonicity. For one, despite it being a story in the first season, it's actually a Sarah Jane light episode. This story also introduces the villain, the Trickster, played by Paul Marks Davis. And it is also a story which introduces reintroduces the Grask, an alien race that had first appeared in Attack of the Grask, a 10th Doctor interactive game that was playable on TV if you press the red button after watching a particular episode of Doctor Who. I've tackled about it on the marathon if you're interested with that. This story also stars Jane Asher, who plays Andrea Yates in this episode. There's actually a little nod to her as we see an article that mentions the Beatles. Jane Asher actually dated Paul McCartney back in the 60s and the 70s, I believe. But anyway, this is a very, very popular story. Some consider it even to be one of the, if not the best episodes in the Sarah Jane Adventures entire run. And as speaking as somebody who's only really seen completely the first series and years down the line, years before, I've watched three other episodes, the two with the Doctors and one with the Brigadier in it. I think I can safely say, yes, this is easily my favourite Sarah Jane episode so far, which is, again, surprising because she's not in it. Well, she is in it, but she's hardly in it. Elizabeth Sladen doesn't appear much in this episode. I don't know if there was any obligations. Maybe she was due for a break because of her older age compared to, when she was previously working on Doctor Who on a regular basis. So I don't know if there was any obligations there to give her a break, or whether it was just necessary for the story. So this story mainly focuses on Maria, basically the main companion of Sarah Jane throughout Series 1, played magnificently by Yasmin Page. And she basically takes the show. This story is mainly focusing about her. Luke's hardly in it. And the rest of the team, Mr. Smith and Clive, they don't make much of an appearance of it. It's mainly Maria and her father, Alan, and as well as her mother. So let's get delving into the story, shall we? Maria and the rest of the gang with Luke, Sarah Jane, Alan and Clive, they're all out basically just enjoying themselves, having a fun blast, showing that there's this lovely community with them, this group, this thriving friendship that each of these characters have with each other. And Maria's father embarrasses her by showing that he's great with a skateboard and tries to teach Clive how to ride a skateboard. This is kind of something which I don't think the story needed, because the previous episodes already helped to establish the connection with these characters. However, I am happy that this scene is here, which means that if you just watch this one episode, which you can recommend to people, then you get what you need in this. But Sarah Jane gets this feeling that someone has just walked over her grave. So then they go back to Barrowman Road, where they go to Sarah Jane's house, and they discover that there is a meteorite heading straight for Earth. Now, this meteorite will go into a Pacific blind spot in humans' navigations, their satellites, And so not even Unit, not even Torchwood could see the impact of this meteorite coming down to Earth to destroy everybody. But don't worry, no panic. In fact, it's completely fine. It is an afterthought in the lives of Sarah Jane, as she's basically arranged that when it comes close to Earth, Mr. Smith, the fantastic computers of hers, will quickly destroy it, and the human race won't even know about it. And Maria kind of has, not an existential crisis of sort, but she kind of does ponder. It's like Sarah Jane has saved the human race time and time and time again. But nobody even knows that she does it. Nobody even thanks her. And Sarah Jane is like, that is good, that is perfect, that is exactly what she wanted. Because she doesn't do it for the publicity. She just does it because A, it's fun, basically, but B, it's, you know, it's protect people and save everybody. And Maria is she does kind of get down by all this. And it is kind of great to see a character just getting down for another character, you know, that she cares about Sarah Jane so much and feels like that she should get more credit than she is given. But Sarah Jane does kind of have this nice little sweet moment with her. There's a bit where she's like, she tells Luke to leave the room so it's just the girls who can have a nice little chat. And Sarah Jane is just reassuring her and showing that there's just this friendship, this beautiful friendship between the two girls, and it really just screams onto the screen. However, the plot starts kicking in again when Sarah Jane decides to give Maria a device, this cube, which was given to him by a merchant or something from a previously unseen story, and was told by Sarah Jane to give this to her best friend in the world and to trust them with them because it will come in handy in the not so distant future. And she gives it to Maria, and Maria then is like, oh thanks, this is amazing, this is absolutely gorgeous, thank you. And so Maria goes back home, talks to her father about just how, well, she tries to talk to her father, but you know, she can't really tell him anything, and she's kind of like complexed by this whole situation, where suddenly the trickster and the Grask appear, and they alter time, they alter the fabric of reality itself, and actually take Sarah Jane out from the timeline. So Maria has a nightmare. I don't know if she saw the events or whether she can sense them because she's in contact with this cube or something. I'm not quite sure how it works in terms of canonicity, but anyway, Maria then wakes up the next day and discovers that her friend has this, her father has this friend who he's known for many years, known as Andrea Yates. Maria has no idea who that is, but the father, Alan, is like, of course you know who Andrea is, of course. And Maria's just like, okay, whatever, I'm going over Sarah Jane's house. Who? Very funny, Dad. And so she goes over next door to Sarah Jane's, only to be greeted by a complete and utter stranger. A stranger who knows her. A stranger named Andrea Yates. And that is mainly the conflict of the story. Maria, thanks to this device, seems to be the only one who remembers Sarah Jane, but nobody else can. And Maria quickly puts together that because Sarah Jane is now nowhere to be seen in this timeline, it means that the comet, which is about to destroy the world, is going to take effect. There's nothing that's going to stop it now. There's no Sarah Jane, no Mr. Smith. There is only destruction and chaos in its wake. And Maria basically is gone mad and tries to convince her father. Now, this means that the majority of this story so far is about Maria and her connection with her father and trying to get her father to believe in her. But the father, obviously, having no idea who Sarah Jane at this point is, and obviously Maria being a child, is getting really concerned about this and thinks that, that she is getting overworked up and stuff. And this story really connects to an idea which a lot of like children programs tackle a lot, but this I think does it really well, and that's the idea of kids just not being listened to by their parents. And it's a very relatable, very understanding situation, and I think a lot of people when they were young felt like this, that their voices wouldn't be heard. But here it's kind of manifest a children political story, if you will, giving the voice to the unheard children, that they are in the right, and it's actually the world, the universe, this concept that is wrong. That this world, it's our universe that is completely and utterly wrong. And it's a very relatable, very understanding situation, that we get in ourselves. And it really helps that through the majority of stories, there's no real villain, there's no real menace. The trickster himself only appears in a handful of scenes. We'll get to the trickster later down the line, and so does the Grask. He mainly appears in the second episode, but in the first half and the first half of the second episode, he is the majority of the story absent. And so the story feels a lot more grounded, a lot more down to earth than any other story that we've seen so far in the first series of the Sarah Jane Adventures. And it gives this story a lot more gravitas than in any other story in the series. And it's mainly, we focus on Maria and how she deals with things. There's a moment where she just shouts, she just screams at Andrea's who are you? What have you done with Sarah Jane? I'm going to find out what's wrong. And slowly she does kind of understand that there's a bit more than going on for. She learns that Andrea claims that she has no idea who Sarah Jane is, but according to library archives, Andrea had a friend named Sarah Jane as a kid back in 1960, I want to say it's 1965, but I could be wrong. And Sarah Jane as a kid passed away and died, and Andrea kind of took her place from the timeline, and that this event, this small little moment, has been altered in a sense to swap the two women around, so that instead of Andrea Yates dying, it was Sarah Jane. And let's get into Andrea Yates, because she does have a very prominent part in this story. She is the character that the story does kind of revolve around, and we get a lot of great scenes with her. And what I think I really like about this story is that, for the most part, though yes, she is kind of this irritating character in a sense that, like in universe sense, she has all these parties and stuff, and all of these characters are like, well, that's Andrea Yates for you. But the story is also puts her really down to earth. She's very relatable in a sense, and we quickly learn that the trickster is an entity that can alter time. However, he needs consent. He needs people to agree to his whims, to his quirms. And Andrea, as a little girl, was in a situation where she saw Sarah Jane. She was about to die, and the trickster was like, I can make you a deal. You can survive. We can swap places, and you will live and she will die, but I need you to agree. And as a kid, she says yes. And so that's how that happens. It was that's how the timelines have changed. But Andrea isn't a bad person per se. She isn't an evil individual. Sure, she gets angry, she gets annoyed, and she gets vicious at characters who slowly learn the truth. But she was a kid back then. She couldn't help. She was scared. She was frightened. She didn't know what she was doing or saying. She was somebody who was frightened for her life. She saw an opportunity, and as a kid, with her moral compass as a kid, as a child, she took the deal, allowing for the trickster to alter reality, alter time. And Maria is basically making her remember her deal with the trickster. And so the trickster returns and makes another deal. I can erase Maria for you. Change it so that Maria never existed. But I need your consent again. And Andrea, who can't take any of this, who is just distorted, she is just absolutely just cursed by this, agrees once more. And so we get a chase scene in which the grass is chasing Maria throughout through the city. She drops the cube and her father Alan picks it up, and when the grass takes Maria, it alters time again so that nobody remembers Maria except for the one who's holding the box, and that is now Alan. So now we live in a world in which nobody except for Alan remembers Maria. We get a scene in which Maria's mother, who I can't remember the name of, she comes visiting into the house, and she's just like, we never had any kids. We never agreed. We couldn't settle down. I know you've always wanted kids, but I couldn't settle down. I couldn't have kids. I'm not mature enough or something. But Alan is just like, this is disgusting. This is a joke. And then he quickly kind of puts together that, wait a minute, if everyone has just forgotten about Maria, that means what Maria was talking about, but everybody was forgetting about Sarah Jane. That must also be true. And so he starts to kind of suspect Andrea's part in all this. And for the most half of the second half, it actually then becomes an Alan story. And I just got to mention this one scene because it is absolutely hilarious. Essentially, Andrea talks to Trixie and is like, well, Alan now knows as well. It's like, we will take care of him. You just got to agree. And so they agree, and the grass then goes chasing after Alan. But the grass goes looking out for him, and Alan, with his skateboard, crashes into the grass, and it's hilarious. It's so I personally just pissed out laughing. It was hilarious. In my opinion, that scene is just cinematic gold. But Maria now being taken to this dimension called limbo, basically where nothing exists, where people go when they are forgotten, when they are wiped out of time itself. And so here she gets reunited with the trickster, and Sarah Jane then becomes back into the narrative. And it's one of the things that we've had so much time in this particular story away from Sarah Jane, that when we are reunited with her, when these two girls who at the start of the story were such great friends reunite, our hearts just warm up, and it's just like, yes! The girls are finally reunited. They might have no way of how they're going to solve this. They have no idea what is going to happen, but we are going to get out of this because the girls are reunited. And so back on Earth, we quickly learn that the meteor strike is about to hit Earth and destroy everything, destroy everyone, and get everything, to destroy just everything in one foul swoop. But back in Limbo, the trickster demands to have a meeting with Sarah Jane, and Sarah Jane has a confrontation with the trickster in probably one of my favourite moments, because in terms of how Sarah Jane connects with the rest of the canon of the universe, because it does kind of ponder. It's like, if Sarah Jane didn't exist, what happened to all of those adventures? What happened to all of her adventures with in time and space, and with the rest of the Sarah Jane adventures? And the trickster basically reveals that he kind of has a way of not exactly stopping, but shifting things to a degree, halting them, if you will, so that all of these Sarah Jane adventures have been stopped, so that the Slovene weren't that aggressive, or didn't attack, or their plan wasn't as deadly as it originally was in her timeline. And what he wanted to do is basically build up all of this, save the Earth on multiple occasions, so that this meteor strike, which will create just pure anarchy and chaos and destruction, because this is the trickster. He is an entity that lives, he breathes, it is his flesh, it is his food, exists for chaos. He is the essential entity of evil. And that's just really cool, and I like his design. And Paul Mace Davis does a fantastic job of bringing this kind of corny, but this really sinister character. It reminds me a lot of the Shadow from the story The Armageddon Factor. Whether there's any sort of relations, the characters seem to be very similar, and also bring that idea of being pure evil, with the Shadow working for none other than the Black Guardian. So whether the trickster is a character that connects to all that, who knows, who to say. It's also important to note that the trickster is actually part of the Trickster Brigade. He's the leader of the Trickster Brigade. Why is that important? Why is that such an essential detail? Because the Trickster Brigade are the only villains that are connected to Doctor Who, Torchwood, and the Sarah Jane Adventures. They're the only villains, even though it's more of an organisation and there's never one singular entity, one singular being, but all three shows have an episode where they are fighting against the Trickster Brigade. So that's really cool in terms of the canon, and this is where the trickster, the leader of the Trickster Brigade, comes from. So that's some really cool canon right there. And this scene basically ends with the trickster. It's like, I'm going to destroy Earth, I'm going to make this massive chaos, but I want to keep you safe, I want to keep you secure, Sarah Jane, because your life has been so important to the existence of the universe. Imagine what deals, imagine what chaos I can bring with you and your life, and the way you're connected to this individual who has saved the universe on thousands occasions. The entity known only as the Doctor, which I think is the first time where the Doctor is an actual plot point in the Sarah Jane Adventures. I could be wrong from my memory. I think this is the first time where her relationship to the Doctor is a prominent part, and Sarah Jane's just like, I am not going to work for you. And so back on Earth, Alan has actually captured the Grask and used his device to bring Maria back into the main timeline. And you can see characters like Maria's mother just like, oh yes, Maria, how did we forget about Maria? And so they make they trick the Grask into bringing, they go to Andrea and basically trying to convince her, try to stop her, because the only person who can stop this is Andrea, because if she denounces the bargain, if she takes the bargain back, then Sarah Jane is restored to the main timeline. And Andrea just breaks down, and there's a great scene in which you can see Sarah Jane in the mirror, and they have this beautiful conversation, and how Sarah Jane remembers Andrea as this loving friend, this really quirky character, but a very lovely and kind-hearted individual. And her death affected her much as a child, and it made her realise that life is precious. We should save it as much as possible, because you don't know when, you don't know how, but one day, quickly, it could just go like that. And Andrea is scared, she's shocked, she's like, I don't know, A, I'm gonna die either way, but B, what happens to the days that I lived? What happens to all this that I have done? Does that just get erased? Do I remember any of this? Or do these days just don't count, they don't exist? What happens to me? Is my life important? And Sarah Jane is just like, yes, and I will remember them for you. You are one of the greatest friends of mine, and I will never forget you, but you need to do this. I'm sorry, but it has to happen. It has to. And so Andrea, not anyone else, Andrea is the one that tells the trickster, no more, I denounce your wish. And it reverts things back to where Luke and Sarah Jane actually return to the main timeline. I love how Luke is just like babbling on and is just like he has like no idea what has happened throughout the rest of the episode. From his point of view, he's just stopped existing, and so he's just babbling on, kind of excited by the fact that, you know, this is all just really exciting stuff. And then Sarah Jane destroys the comet quite easily, and the story ends on a cliffhanger in which the characters basically realise, Alan is still here, and he now knows about all of this. There's no way we can, for example, in the Eye of the Gorgon, where they kind of like convince himself that, you know, what happened wasn't alien extraterrestrial interaction. Here there's no way of denying it, and so the cliffhanger is basically him talking to the Sarah Jane Adventures crew, and it's just like, right, I want answers. What is going on? In a very unhappy sense, in a way. And you can kind of get a feeling that in the next episode, in the finale, he isn't too happy about what Sarah Jane is leading these kids into. But anyway, that is whatever happened to Sarah Jane. Overall, it is a fantastic piece of media. It's easily one of the most well executed, well written, well directed. It's a shame that it was written by Gareth Roberts, who is just a real life bigot. But the story does hold up extremely well. It's directed beautifully, even though there are some really corny moments here and there in terms of how the story looks. But I feel like it's Graham Harper giving maybe a little bit too much creative style to the story, which is, in my opinion, it's better than a lack of creative style, in my opinion. So it's never dull, it's never uninteresting. The villain is great. I love how we hardly see him, and he just has this otherworldly presence about him, as if he is the embodiment of chaos, because that's what he is. He is the embodiment of chaos. The fact that Sarah Jane isn't in it that much should have been a bummer, because it is the first series of Sarah Jane. But Maria is such a strong character in terms of how she's written that we, as an audience, do feel and connect with the story through her eyes, through her viewpoint. And so that's how this story works. And it's it's one of the great Sarah Jane Adventures episodes, highly recommended by me. Now, before I go, there's a fact I've just remembered. Jane Asher, the woman who plays Andrea Yates, she also played Susan Foreman in an audio drama short thing. It wasn't for Big Finish, it was something else. But that story was called Whatever Happened to Susan Foreman, which is a strange and cool coincidence. But anyway, that's whatever happened to Sarah Jane. So join me next time where the Doctor and Donna go on a holiday. And the Doctor takes a little journey with a handful of people. But something is lurking outside the cabin, outside of the cart that they're in, as an entity is trying to get in, and nobody has a real good answer. And nobody is listening to the Doctor because he is clever. So join me next time for midnight. And I'll see you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-ra!